The Desmond Tutu Centre for Religion and Social Justice aims to promote trans-disciplinary research-led community engagement that focuses on the critical intersections between religion and social justice. To speak more on what the centre does and the Archbishop's legacy, we're joined by Professor Surajini Nadar. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this afternoon. No doubt a very difficult time, not just for yourselves, but the community at large that he worked with.
Yes, thanks, Dudu. Thanks for having me. Indeed, it is a sad moment for all of us, but I think it's also an opportunity to celebrate and commemorate the rich and remarkable, phenomenal human being that Archbishop Tutu was. And so we in the centre are enormously privileged and feel quite honoured to be able to continue his legacy.
We are mentioning here that the centre is a trans-disciplinary research-led community engagement that focuses on the critical intersections between religion and social justice. In helping us to understand his contribution, what does that mean, firstly?
So I think often when we think about the role of religion in social justice, we tend to reduce it to acts of charity, right? So we think of soup kitchens or, shelters, developmental work. And I think a good way to describe what we do in the centre is to invoke another late bishop, Bishop Don Helder Camara, who said, "When I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor are poor, they call me a communist." And I think we in the centre are interested in asking those questions. Why are the poor poor? What is the relationship between religious belief and poverty, or between religious belief and gender-based violence, between religious belief and climate change? And I suppose what we're saying is it's not enough to keep building shelters for abused women or, building soup kitchens if we don't interrogate the sources of that abuse or of that poverty, which are often very much located in religion and religious and cultural beliefs. I think we have to admit and recognize that apartheid was religiously sanctioned and theologically justified. And the reason we are celebrating and commemorating this great man is because he fought against the religious and theological sanction and justification of apartheid.
What I deduce from what you have just said is a question, I guess, maybe pops up in my mind in terms of the relevance of the church in modern day society. If we're still asking why are the poor poor, and what is it that the church is doing? So what is it that you find from the work that you do on the relevance of the church today?
Well, I think, Judy, I think often what happens in developmental work, in even in work in the gendered fields which I work in, is that we want to ignore religion, right? We want to ignore the church. We want to ignore the mosque. We want to ignore religion as something that is not compatible, if you like, with social justice. And I think we do that at our peril. I think when we ignore religion, what we are doing is we're not seeing the role that religion can play in both perpetuating injustice, as we've seen in apartheid, as we see in the Palestinian struggle, as we see in the queer phobia. But at the same time, I think the life of the Archbishop shows us that religion also has a number of resources that can be used to engage these injustices. And so I think that's the role of the centre, is to try to understand how we bring these two things together. How do we bring religious belief and social justice together? I think the Archbishop is famous for saying, what did he say? You can't keep pulling people out of the river. You have to swim upstream at some point to find out why they are in the river to begin with. And I think that's the work of the center. It's trying to interrogate the sources of the injustice.
And in that comes you and I, right? So you say that we ignore religion at our own peril. There are people who have never set foot in a church, but they're good people. There are people who filling churches up, and we understand, right? So you go to a hospital because you need some assistance, you're not feeling so well, so you go to church for whatever reasons that you need to, because you need whatever upliftment or help that you need. Now, what is the difference between spirituality and religion? I ask you this in relation to that, to say there are people who never go to church, who are not necessarily religious, but they will help you. They're good people. Then there are people who go to church and they won't even look twice at you when you're suffering.
Yeah, I mean, this is the lifelong question, isn't it? The question of, does one need to be religious to be good or moral? Or, that's the big moral question that we face. And indeed, I think what was so special about the Archbishop's life is that you could be a person of faith and you could be a person of no faith. You could be a person of other faiths, and he was equally welcoming of all people. I think I wouldn't say that you need religion to be moral, or that you need religion to be good, or I think what we do, the work that we do in the center, is simply to understand how people themselves understand their spirituality, their relationship with the moral universe, right? And so I don't think our job is just to basically say that you need religion to do the good that needs to be done in the world. I think our job is to try to understand how religion may or may not help us to achieve those ends. And so that's what I'm interested in. I personally am not I'm not interested in the binary between being religious and spiritual, because there is a binary, right? We know that. And certainly we know that the institutional church in particular, since we are talking about the church here, has not done a great deal of good, actually, and has, if anything, if you think about the question of sexuality, or the question of Palestine, and where the church stands on these issues, it hasn't always been on the right side of history. But again, I bring us back to the life of the Arch, who exemplified an alternative, more life-giving possibility, and I suppose that's what I'm interested in.
Prof, thank you very much for your time, and to you and your team, take heart. That was the Desmond Tutu Centre for Religion and Social Justice Chair, Professor Surajini Nadar.